Okay, let's continue. This class is all about giving us a good grasp on our sword, right? If we're going to fight the battle, then we need to learn how to use our weapons. So as we're entering the book of Judges, hopefully by the end of this class, you're going to be fired up and you'll have some good notes you can put in your Bible on what the purpose of this book is, what the main application of this book is, what the key verse, if there's a key word, what that would be, and then maybe key lessons. So as far as title, there's nothing magical about it. It's just, it means, the name Judges would mean one who rules or even delivers, like a deliverer. A judge would have been a deliverer. So at this point in history, think about the nation of Israel. We're looking at the Word of God, even though we know it's not all in chronological order. You've got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua. So if you think about it, nearly 2,000 years of history have already taken place right here. Right? We've got Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the flood. Just that in and of itself was 1,000 years. And then you've got Abraham, the patriarchs, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, the 12 tribes. And then, really, you got this new thing starting from Exodus all the way to Deuteronomy. And that's where God has established his people. He's given them a law. He's taking them to this promised land. They finally reach the land in Joshua, to the promised land. And Joshua's a picture of who? Who's he a type of? He's a type of Christ. He's the one that brought them to the land. So Joshua didn't come into the picture. Moses represented the law. You see, when the law's gone, Jesus comes and he makes everything right. So that's what we saw last week in Joshua. So Israel's in the land, but is there a king yet? No, there's not been a king established, because as we know from our leadership class, the first king was Saul. And the reason that they had their king was because Israel wanted to be like the rest of society. Right? That's like our kids looking at everybody else saying, well, how come we can't have that? We want to stay up late like they get to stay up late. I mean, I've dealt with that with my kiddos already. And that's where I say, well, we're not like them. Period. And one day you're going to thank me for that. Well, God's dealing with Israel. They were begging so bad for a king that he says, fine, I'm going to answer your prayer in spite of your ridiculous requests, and I'm going to give you a king, and you're going to regret this. So he's teaching them a lesson, because we know Israel. They were pushing and pushing and pushing until they finally got what they wanted. So here we are, the book of Judges. There's no king yet. If anything, what God's using is a system of these deliverers. A judge would be like, well, kind of like how a judge is in today's realm. The judge is one of the highest. A judge has more authority than a police officer does, in essence. They get to actually call some of the shots and make decisions that even police officers can't make. So these were the guys in charge, because there wasn't a king set up yet. So 21 chapters, 618 verses, 18,976 words. And no doubt about it, the key verse, let's go to 21:25. Very last verse of the book of Judges, and let's have somebody read that. Judges 21:25.
In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did that which was right in his own eyes.
Okay, and that verse is actually repeated a couple other times in the book as well, but this sums up what this book is all about. First thing we see is those days. What does those days remind you of? You guys should have gotten this in your last class with Mike. Tribulation time. Generally, when you see that phrase, those days, that's a tribulation context doctrinally, okay? So we'll get to that in a moment. But it says, there was no king in Israel, colon. You guys see that colon right there? When you see a colon in English, what that means is the next statement is describing what was just mentioned. So we just read that there's no king. Now he's giving a description of what no king looks like. It looks like this. Everybody does that which is right in his own eyes. If there is no authority, it leads to chaos. It leads to anarchy. That's why we say in leadership, anything with two heads is a monster, right? That's why they draw monsters with 2 and 3 heads. You can't have 2 heads. There's one head. There's one authority. Now there's a structure that God set up, but the buck's got to stop somewhere with someone. So we know who the true king is. It should be the Lord. They were supposed to operate where he was their king, but that wasn't happening. So instead, everybody did right in their own eyes. So we'll visit that as well, but that's the key verse. If there were a key chapter, I would say it would be chapter 2. Well, let's go there. Judges chapter 2. And one of the reasons this would be one of the key chapters is because it really sets the tone for this book. It really lays out the pattern that's happening. Go to verse 11. It says, "The children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord and served Balaam. And they forsook the Lord, God of their fathers, which brought them out of Egypt, and followed other gods, of the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord and served Baal and Ashtaroth." Now, if you recall, in Joshua, they were supposed to be wiping out all the inhabitants of the land. They didn't wipe them all out. And that's the main reason we still see remnants of the false gods still in the land. That's one of the big reasons for the apostasy that we see in the book of Judges, is because it was incomplete obedience from the book of Joshua. So we didn't hammer that heavy last time, but that actually, I mean, just the fact right here that there's still other gods in the land shows that they didn't do it completely the right way. So there's verses that clarify that both in Joshua and Judges. But you go to verse 14, it says, "The anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he delivered them into the hands of the spoilers that spoiled them. He sold them into the hands of their enemies round about, so they could no longer stand before their enemies." And then, verse 16, "Nevertheless, the Lord raised up judges, which delivered them out of the hand of those that spoiled them." Verse 17, "Yet they would hearken not unto their judges, but they went a-whoring after gods, and bowed themselves unto them." And guys, it just goes on and on. What happens is you see a continual cycle of Israel's in apostasy, God sends them in the hands of the enemy, and then they cry out for God's help, so he sends them a deliverer or a judge, and we'll talk about who they were in a moment. And then they wind up rejecting the judge, just like they reject Christ, and then the same thing happens again. And isn't that crazy? We're supposed to learn from history. That's a pattern in human history. That's not just a pattern with Israel. And that, boy, wait till we do church history. You guys have that class, that's one of the funnest classes, because it really is eye-opening when you look at the last 2,000 years of history. And you can learn, if there's one thing about history, it's the fact that man doesn't learn a lesson. I mean, history repeats itself, for crying out loud. But anyway, chapter 2 kind of lays out, it sets the pace for what this book is about. As far as authorship, more than likely, I put probably it's Samuel. There's no proof that shows that, but this was during the time of the judges, and he would have been the main priest and prophet that was around then. So more than likely it was him. And there's a verse somewhere that it doesn't say he wrote Judges, but that he wrote, it's in Samuel, where it talks about how he wrote one of the other books. So your guess is as good as mine if you want to try to come up with somebody else. It could have been the book of Nathan the prophet, even though that's not one of the Bible books. Nathan could have possibly written it too, but I'd go with Samuel. Now, if there's a theme, what do you guys think the theme of Judges will be, if anybody wants to take a guess?
I have in my Bible from B.Q. lawlessness.
Lawless, okay.
Lawlessness. Whatever.
Interesting.
Who taught these classes? Because you said that about the last
No, I think that goes with what I'm getting ready to say. I would put something like this, it goes with what you're saying, Heather. No proper authority equals chaos. Lawlessness equals chaos. You can even call this, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, the law of human collapse. Have you ever heard of that? The law of human collapse. What that means is that Darwin was wrong. Darwin says that humanity is getting better. I had a Muslim tell me a couple years ago, he was trying to argue with me that society was actually getting better. This was a Muslim, you guys say. And he was telling me society was getting better because of technology, because of the American dollar. I mean, he's bringing up all this, everything from the Industrial Revolution, and that we're now more advanced. And I'm just like, now is God saying the same thing? Does God really think that human nature is getting better? You can't base that just on technology and on money and prosperity. Man is trying to become God. So yeah, if you want to look at it in that light, sure, man's becoming better. But from God's perspective, no, we're collapsing. We're going downhill. It even says it in the Bible. That's why Jesus needs to come back and fix this place. So the reason why is because there's no proper authority. There's no final authority. It always leads to chaos. So definitely that's the theme that you see throughout this book. There's a time range here of roughly 1425 BC to 1120 BC. 1425 to 1120. So it's about 300 years. Now, chapter 2, we kind of looked at what the history behind this really is. So you could put something like this. On a historical note, what you have is Israel departs from the Lord. Okay? Israel departs from the Lord. So he punishes them. Then they cry out to the Lord again. God sends a deliverer. To rescue them. Then they fall again in the same cycle. I know it's kind of a lot to write. This is, in a nutshell, historically what's happened over and over again. These 12 judges that are listed in the book, it's the story. They're all deliverers that God sent because Israel kept sliding back. So, if that's the history behind it, then the doctrine behind it, I know we saw the phrase "those days." By the way, those days happens to be 7 times in the book of Judges, just that phrase alone. But what are the days right before the tribulation? The days just before the tribulation, what would they be called? What's today? The day we're in now? Laodicea. There's 7 church ages, okay? Revelation 2 and 3 gives us 7 church ages. The final church age is what's called the Church of Laodicea. Can somebody tell me what Laodicea means? Right of the people. And every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Guys, the book of Judges mirrors our church age. So for doctrine, what you could put down is that it's the last days of the church. Last days of the church, which happens to be Laodicea. And it goes right into the tribulation. So it's the last days of the church, right into the tribulation period. I mean, think about it. America today is right in his own eyes, just like here in the book of Judges. And that Western mindset is spreading its seeds of leaven throughout the world. You guys know how King Saul is a picture of the Antichrist, and King David is a picture of Christ? When we go back to that little pattern, we've got Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges. Then we got Ruth. Ruth is actually the time of the Judges. Then you got 1 Samuel. So during all this time right here, the law's getting established. They make it to the land right here, and the first king is set up. Who's the king here in 1 Samuel? King Saul. Who's Saul a picture of? The Antichrist. So we live in a time right now, guys, just prior to King Saul's reign, which is just prior to King David's reign, which is the Lord Jesus Christ. My point is this: we're living in the time of the Judges. So the time of the Judges is kind of like a bridge, if you will, in between the church age and the tribulation. Because when I say we're at the end of the church age, we're at like the tip of the end where the rapture could happen tonight. That's how sure I am about this. And it's not just because there's Bible prophecies that explain it. There's pictures that make it clear in the church. If our calendar is correct, if our calendar was correct and everything we prophesied was right on, it would happen at 2000. But because our timetable doesn't always match God's timetable, and our calendar might have been off a little bit over the years, that compensates for some of these days that we're off. But when you look at the 7,000 years, that a day with the Lord is 1,000 years, you look at the days of history, there's been 6 days. We are right on the brink of the 7th day. So, of course, the 7th day is what? Yeah, the millennium, or the day of the Lord. So a day lasts 1,000 years. The day of the Lord is what's the millennium. The rapture kicks it off for us as part of the church. So I'm just saying that this is really applying to us. So when you read the book of Judges, you should see some things and say, ooh, I need to fix that in my life. And I need to make sure that, in my household, as I'm leading here, I want to be sensitive to what needs to happen in this ministry. And, we're going to look at this tonight and see some of these examples. So let's get into the inspiration, because
Well, it's interesting you say that, though, because what's being fought over in Washington right now is the Supreme Court.
Okay.
That's the new big fight in Washington right now.
Mhm.
You think that is that though?
Yeah.
He was the one.
I mean, that's like the big thing right now.
He was appointed?
He was. He is confirmed. The Democrats are saying that
They're doing whatever
regain
they can
control,
to-
they'll impeach him.
Yeah.
At least try to.
Yeah, no doubt about it. We can see it through politics. Let me give you some inspiration. Let's go to chapter 1, verse 1. And let's have somebody read that.
Now after the death of Joshua it came to pass that the children of Israel asked the Lord, saying, Who shall go up for us against the Canaanites first, to fight against them?
Okay, so check this out. The very first verse in this crazy book called Judges, where all hell breaks loose, happens to say this: after the death of Joshua. So there's a principle here that we can inspirationally take, and it's once Joshua is out of the picture, all hell Joshua is the Lord Jesus Christ. As Christians, you get Jesus out of the picture in your life and you decide to do things your way, I'm just telling you, hell's gonna break loose. You know who some of the most miserable people are on this earth? It's not the unsaved, it's not the poor, it's not even the Christians who are doing right, it's the Christians who aren't where they're supposed to be with the Lord. Because what do you have when you're saved? You got two natures. You got an old nature and a new nature, and they're dueling it out. And that old nature won't let your new godly nature enjoy itself. Or vice versa. Your new nature won't let your old nature have a good time. I got family members, they are miserable. And it's because they're believers who aren't where they should be. That internal struggle's happening, and it's getting the best of them. When I just want to say, guys, just yield. Will you just yield yourself? You'll spare yourself some major heartache. And unfortunately, they're choosing to get Jesus out of the picture. And Christians do this all the time. So that's a great lesson we can learn, because if you think about it, we really should have given up our rights the moment that he paid a great price for us. 1 Corinthians 6:20 says that I belong to him. My body is his temple. He bought me with a great price. He paid his precious blood. And so as a result, I'm his. I have no rights. But my flesh says, oh no, you do have rights. It's called the rights of the people, baby. You ever read Colossians? Colossians is a book that actually mentions Laodicea, I think, 4 or 5 times. That's another great book that mirrors the book of Judges. It's because it's written directly to a Laodicean believer, somebody who's struggling with thinking that, well, it's my rights. Wrong. If you belong to him, it's his rights. So, in essence, I think a good practical application is just that, man, you get Joshua out of the picture, you get Jesus out of the picture, it's going to be chaos in your life. Not a good move.
It's crazy though, because it's like, Joshua's out of the picture, but then they're like, they still want someone to lead them.
Yes, that's human nature.
Yeah.
Humans are crying out for leadership.
Even though we're saying the rights to people, we wanna do what we wanna do, we're still dying for somebody to tell us what to do.
Yes.
Or show us where to go.
That's a great point.
That's when Satan can go, I'll do it. Slither in there. Sorry, side note.
No, I think
That was
that's
going
great.
on in my head.
That's great. Somebody go to 3:9 and read what that says. Chapter 3, verse 9.
It says, and when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised up a deliverer to the children of Israel, who delivered them, even Othniel, the son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother.
Okay, so Christ is seen, and you just read it, as our deliverer. That phrase, our deliverer, is nearly 50 times in the book of Judges. So many of these judges that God sends them to deliver them, they're types of Christ. In fact, if you guys wanted to, we could go through some of them later on tonight, if you want extra credit, and we no. Seriously though, some of these judges, like Samson, you see clear resemblance. Even though his character wasn't Christ-like, you see so many pictures and patterns where it's like, he's a picture of Christ. That's amazing. You look at Gideon, you look at Jephthah. It's just pretty neat to see, well, God did that on purpose. Because once again, this book is really centered on Jesus Christ. It's not really about these judges. These judges were people with flaws just like you and me. And yet God used them mightily. That's just another reminder that God can use anybody. That's what's beautiful about it. You don't have to be especially qualified. So Christ is seen as our deliverer. Now, a simple outline, I think Judges breaks pretty beautifully in a simple manner. And chapters 1 and 2 break down. You could almost put chapters 1 and 2 as, put the word apathy down. Apathy. And then you can even put down Israel's idolatry while chapter 1 and 2 is happening, you see an apathetic spirit of, they don't really care that the enemy's invading their land and that they're starting to worship their gods. It's very apathetic. Sound like churches today? I mean, I'm just telling you, this mirrors, it's a deterioration, and it's killing churches. It's idolatry. Idolatry is covetousness. And if we're not careful, it'll invade our church. So apathy. Chapters 3 through 16, this would be apostasy. Apostasy. That's basically like a big rebellion. Apostasy is to turn against the faith. Because in chapters 3 through 16, what you have happen is 12 judges deliver them, but they keep falling back into apostasy. And then the last portion of Judges, which would be chapters 17 through 21, would be anarchy. And this would be a continued disobedience. Continued disobedience. Now, I went ahead on this first part of the key notes. Instead of making you guys write down the definitions of all these names, you should thank me for that. I'm
Thanks,
sure your hands
Bob.
are tired. There are some neat definitions. By the way, when a Bible gives you the definition of a name, or even in Bible times, names have significance. So you can learn a lot just by looking at some of these definitions of names. Othniel means lion of God. Ehud, he's the one who, you guys remember that passage, chapter 3, where he stabs the king and his fat rolls over? And, I mean, it's a crazy story, but there's lessons we learn from this. Like, you put the sword in until the dirt comes out. I mean, what's the sword resemble? The Word of God. So, I mean, there's lots of neat practical things you could preach. But you get to Deborah, she was the judge, and Jael was the one who took the spike and drove it through the head of the enemy. Hey, what do you think that's a picture of? We talked earlier about a head wound from the devil. You see, once again, the main theme of this book is about a battle. It's a battle that has to do with the throne. Okay? It's not about us, but the kingdom of God. And since the very beginning, even before we were around, there was a king who got envious and he wanted the throne. So that battle's been happening, and we don't know how much before Genesis 1:1, how long that was before. I'm sorry, let me fix that. We don't know how long in between Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. When we do the Genesis class, you're going to see there is a gap of time, and we're going to give you reasons how you know that. But that could have happened so longer than we even realized. But we know since Adam has been here, it's been 6,000 years. So, anyways, I'm just saying that's the bigger picture. That's why we keep seeing pictures of the Antichrist versus the real Christ. You know, Christ, all it means is Messiah. There can be a Christ with a lowercase c. There's one true Christ, though, that's Jesus. There's also an Antichrist, that's the devil. There's actually many Antichrists, but there's one main Antichrist. Just like how there's many devils, but there's one devil. Does that make sense? One capital D devil, and then there's many devils. So it's the same thing. There's one Christ, but there's many Christs. We're all Christ because we're in Him. So anyway, I'm kind of getting off track, but these are some good definitions, though. I mean, you go down to Gideon. Gideon's a fun one. you realize that, I look at Gideon and I'm just like, wow, he kind of mirrors me. God calls him and he's like, I'm a nobody. I'm nothing but a poor boy. And God says, forget your past, forget who you were, I got a plan for you. It's neat to look at him. Abimelech, Tola, Jair, Jephthah, that's another fun one. Jephthah's the one, if you remember, got so excited. He says, Lord, whatever walks through that door, I'm going to make sure I sacrifice it when I get home, if you give me victory. So what happens? God gives him victory. He gets home, and the first thing that comes out of his door is this one single virgin God. And what's crazy about that whole story is if he knew the Word of God like he should have, he would not have had to sacrifice her. He could have actually had an excuse, and he could have used the Word of God in place of his mistake. But he followed through in a very jacked up story. So he made a stupid vow. Isban, Elon, Abdon, and Samson is the one that we all learned about when we were kids. His name means like a son, like the sun. So a lot of meanings behind those meanings. It actually ties into some pictures and what they represent. But I'd like to focus on this next page. We'll spend the rest of our time.
I didn't have Samson on mine.
Uh-oh, must have cut off.
How many do you have on yours? We have 11.
Well, there's 11, but you got Jael, kind of off to the side over here.
But she wasn't a judge, though, was she?
No.
No, okay,
Yeah,
so yeah.
Okay,
there's
just
only
write down Samson as number 12, and then his name means
Samson.
like the sun. That's the definition of Samson's name. Like the sun. Remember how I told you he's a picture of Christ? That's just one tiny aspect of that, because of course, Jesus is the ultimate son, and he's even spelled S-U-N in Malachi.
You got any
Verses.
verses?
Nope, this is chapters 13 through 16. Chapters 13 through 16.
And you only had 12, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Let's look at this chart. I want to give you the big picture and compare Joshua to Judges, because remember how chapter 1, verse 1, you read it, Heather, basically said, now after the death of Joshua, so what we can immediately do is say, okay, now that Christ is out of the picture, here's what happens. It all goes downhill. So this little chart, you could take this, if you get to preach at the rescue mission, if you get to give a devotion, maybe in your tribe you'll get a chance. This is something that would be great to share, just some practical application. So for instance, in the book of Joshua, they were victorious, right? They made it to the land. They fought. God gave them victory, and Joshua was their captain. Beautiful picture of victory. In Judges, they lived in defeat. Joshua was victorious, but Judges was defeat. I'm just telling you, whenever you want to live as your own God, as your own king, your own rights, you're going to live in defeat. In Joshua, they were at rest and liberty, because that promised land represents rest. In Judges, they were in bondage. They were always in bondage in the book of Judges. I know a lot of Laodicean Christians who are struggling in bondage. There's some kind of habit or a hang-up that they're in. Why is medicine so rampant today? I mean, they're in bondage to, and when I say medicine is necessary for certain things, don't get me wrong. But we live in a day and age where this book's not even considered. Medicine comes first before it. Whatever happened to Lord, I'm going to first come to you and pray. And when I say medicine, I'm dealing with even like issues of anxiety, depression, stress. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. So we need to first say, Lord, I have no rights. You're my God. If I have to feel this way, and I was just telling Mike the other day, there's days I feel depressed. Now, I could go see a psychologist or a doctor, and they might tell me, share about your past, and then they might label me as clinically depressed. But that's only gonna make me worse. How about I just deal with depression and realize, I think there's times Jesus was depressed. I think Paul was depressed. And I know we all have different makeups and personalities and pasts that we've all been through. I think some of that plays into it. But, man, I want this to be my first medicine. And I wanna make sure that I'm not screwing God over. So, otherwise I will be in bondage. And there's been times where I've been in bondage because, you know, I'm living as if it's my rights.
I was just talking to Heather about that just yesterday, actually, because I was diagnosed with being bipolar three or 4 years ago, and I was on medicine for like 3 or 4 years, and just this year I completely stopped medicine.
You cold turkey quit? Did you have to have withdrawals?
Well, I tapered I didn't taper myself off. The doctor tapered me off. He said, "How you doing?" I said, "Good." And
Amen.
it's, you know, ever since I got more in the Word and got stronger,
Yeah, Nate, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that testimony.
it was just unbelievable.
And there's no other book that can do it. It's this book right here, it's the power of the Word of God.
And it's something I never thought neither of us would ever thought that it would happen.
Yeah, dude, that's a testimony. That's one of those things I was telling the other class that you need not forget about. You need to write that down. Of course, you remember it. But use that as a testimony to testify of His power. Because you were in bondage, you're not in bondage anymore. And then there's going to be something else that's going to try to shackle you up. Well, this is always going to be the solution. God gives us His Word, each other, and His Spirit. We tap into those three things. In Joshua, they believed God, whereas in Judges, they exhibited unbelief. There's a verse in Judges, if I remember where it's at, right at the beginning, where it talks about how they couldn't drive the inhabitants of the land. You know what I'm talking about?
But the Asherites dwelt among the Canaanites, the inhabitants of the land, for they did not drive them out.
Yeah, but it says they can't. It's the one that says that they can't. Where's that at? I think it's in chapter 1.
132 is what I read.
Yeah, it reminds me of that verse. You guys remember that verse in the Gospels where it says that Jesus did not many mighty works there because it's like He couldn't because of their unbelief. It mirrors that verse. I wish I would have looked it up beforehand and would have seen it. That's all right. But it basically, it emphasizes that they couldn't drive them out because they didn't believe. When you lack the faith, it limits God. God works based on our faith. That's a principle we can learn from that. So we see that they exhibited unbelief. And seriously, guys, think about it. There are so little people who you could say, boy, that's a man of faith. That's a woman of faith. It's just hard to find that. That's today's day and age. Look at Judges. In Joshua, they were advanced, but in Judges, they slipped. In Joshua, they were heavenly minded. In Judges, they were earthly minded. No doubt about it. Even towards the end, you get the tribe of Dan, which in Genesis they're actually called a serpent. So they're a picture of the devil. Of all the tribes of Israel, Dan was the one. Well, they happened to set up a Baal worship system, and they wanted a robed father to be their god. Guys, that's Catholicism. And this isn't even the New Testament yet. Remember how we saw some of that Catholicism in Deuteronomy? You're seeing it again. Do you see why we keep seeing Catholicism throughout the scripture? Because that's the devil's whore. Just as God has a bride, which is the church, Satan has, or his bride also, which would be a whore, is the Roman Catholic Church. But you see that's towards the end of Judges. Earthly minded. That's how a lot of Christians today, even if they're Protestant, guys, there's a lot of Protestants that live like a Catholic. They live under a works-based system. They're very carnal. Boy, Catholicism is one of the most carnal religions out there. It brainwashes people, and that's how a lot of Protestants live as well. It's gross. They were true to God in Joshua. In Judges, they turned to the God of Baal. In Joshua, they enjoyed God's blessing, but in Judges, they experienced grief. In Joshua, they were empowered by God, but in Judges, they were weakened by the flesh. Once again, it mirrors today. In Joshua, they had a oneness with God, but in Judges, they were at enmity with God. Enmity, just like how James says, he says, know ye not that friendship with the world is enmity with God? Well, they were friends with the world, joining in their idolatry, doing their own thing. Who are you to judge me? And I'm like, today? Oh yeah. You say the J word, judge, people flip a lid. It's almost as bad as the S word. Submit. In Joshua, one would not tolerate sin, but in Judges, they condone sin. Once again, that definitely mirrors today. You know, Paul's the one that says, all things may be lawful unto me, but all things are not expedient to me. Just because the law says I can do it, doesn't mean it's good that I do it. Right? There's certain things that are legal in our society. Does that mean we should do it, though? As Christians? No. Once again, because I am not my own. I have no rights. And that's the difference. The difference is this. We need to be Philadelphian Christians in the midst of the Laodicean period. And that's possible. Is it easy? No. And it's not easy because we're so saturated in a Laodicean culture. We're born with this my rights mentality. So I don't want to be one of those guys that says, I'm just a Philadelphian Christian in the midst of Laodicea. Be careful. I'm Laodicean myself. I don't like it. But I'm going to strive to be Philadelphian. You say, well, what do you mean by Philadelphian? In Revelation 2 and 3, the sixth church age, the one that's just prior to ours, beautiful church age. They're the church that kept God's word. It was the church age that had the largest missionary movement in history. I mean, they sacrificed their lives so people could get the gospel. That's what we're supposed to be about. And there is a small remnant, I believe, of Philadelphian Christians in the Laodicean church age. Let's be a part of that remnant. So, in a nutshell, I think that's what it boils down to, is that we have no rights. Is your chair acting up on you?
Yeah, I felt like it was gonna fold up on me. And they laugh at me.
Almost fell. No big deal.
Okay, guys, let's look at one final note. I want to point this out to you. I think there's a lot of things that contributed to this depravity in the book of Judges. Okay? One of them was, like I had mentioned, they didn't complete what they were supposed to have done. They were supposed to wipe out all the inhabitants, but they would keep certain kings alive. And that's just incomplete obedience. It became a thorn in their side. And that really starts happening in the book of Judges. But let's go to chapter 2, verse 10, because this is, I think, the main contribution to what we see happening. Let's have somebody read chapter 2. Actually, pick it up in verse... go ahead and read 7 through 10.
And the people served the Lord all the days of Joshua, and all the days of the elders that outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great works of the Lord that he did for Israel. And Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. They buried him in the border of his inheritance in Timnathia. That's the best I can do. In the mount of Ephraim on the north side of the hill of Gash. And also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers. There arose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel.
Okay. Joshua dies, and notice what it said. They never trained another generation. That next generation didn't even know the Lord. This right here is it, guys. No discipleship. 2 Timothy 2:2 is so vital. You eliminate 2 Timothy 2:2, and you're going to have a church like Raritan. Raritan was a church that we invested in just last year. They asked us to fill the pulpit for several weeks in hopes of finding a pastor. And so we looked at this church, this dying church. They had no discipleship, and so we presented it to them, the philosophy of discipleship. And sadly, they turned it down, and they wonder why they're a dying church. They preach the Bible. They teach the Word of God. They believe the right doctrines. But if you're not training another generation, which they're not, that church in the next 10 years is going to be completely folded, if not before then. It's already just about a dead church. So there's so many more churches that are just like that. Good Bible-believing churches. If we do not make disciples in our church, if we're not actively training leaders and reproducing ourselves, we're going to be in trouble in 15, 20 years. Even before that, actually.
So they just turned down us? Like, how?
Last year,
Yeah.
this church, after several weeks of investing in them, every message we preached, we sent over there, it was on the importance of discipleship. Fruit, and just the purpose on how Jesus patterned himself. It wasn't just about getting the gospel to the world, but training them and equipping them so that it could multiply. That entire philosophy. And the problem is, when you get a bunch of old folks who are set in their ways, they're comfortable, because let's face it, it's hard making disciples. It's easy doing events and having traditional potlucks and evangelism classes and all that, but to actually say the hard words to people, to be the parents that you need to be. Sometimes you've got to be a spiritual father or a spiritual mother. To make disciples is the hard work. They didn't want a part of that.
There's just a whole lot of young people, physical young people as a church.
But there could have been. There was opportunities. And I could name probably 5 more churches off the top of my head that are just like that. It's very unfortunate. So I just think that that's a key note in the book of Judges. Guys, if we don't train another generation, do we want the book of Judges to take place in our church? That's what's going to happen. Because it turns into, it's my rights. Anarchy. If there's no leadership, it's going to be the principle of foolishness is found in the heart of a child. They need led. They need led by the proper authority, because without that, it turns into chaos. So any questions on Judges? I tried to give you just the big picture.
It sucks that a small town